Hello, my friend. Today, you and I are going to set up a task that auto tags products when their SKUs change. And the inspiration for this is a merchant who wants to add, what do they want to do? They want to be able to easily filter their product list for the products that need their physical price tags reprinted. And that is necessary whenever any SKU changes, whether it changes from no SKU to a SKU or an existing SKU to a different existing SKU. So what we're going to do is first talk about our subscriptions. So we know at least that we need to run this task every time a product is updated, and that's good. However, the nature of these events, and I can preview the event data here, is such that we only see what the product looks like at the time of the update. We don't actually get a diff, which means that it's our responsibility to remember, if you will, what the value was beforehand so that we can compare it. And as in our task here, what we're caring about is the SKUs for each of the variants, which means that what we need to do is at some point before a product update, we need to have visited every product and cached or stored somewhere what the SKUs actually were at that time. A mechanic has two different places where you can store data. Well, no, that's not right. Mechanic only has one place where you can store data, and that's in the cache. And we've got some documentation on it. The cache is writable with the cache action and readable with the cache object. It's a good place to store data that you only care about temporarily. You can only store data there for up to 60 days. I'm not going to use this because to use this, we would need to either guarantee that a product will only be updated less than 60, or product updates will only occur less than 60 days apart, which is not something that we can guarantee, obviously. Like that would work, or either we would need to be like scanning the product list every 60 days just to keep our cache updated. Ultimately, this approach feels wrong to me because the mechanism that we're talking about here, this task, it doesn't feel right to me anyway to store data that's critical to this task in a temporary cache that we shouldn't be relying on for long-term use. So we're going to scratch that completely. Just talked about it so that you know the option exists. For the purpose of this, though, what we're going to use is a meta field. And a meta field can be stored on every product, not on each variant. So what we'll be doing is storing a meta field on the product that contains a list of all of the, like each variant SKU. And that way, whenever a new variant, whenever a new product update comes in, we can check against that list and see if we actually have a change or not. So that scan needs to happen in response to some event. Shouldn't be done on every product update, although we should be updating the meta field to reflect the current SKU on every product update. Instead of that, we're going to use the mechanic user trigger subscription. You'll note this adds another item here over the preview. So if we begin there, and no, not of there we go, event.topic. So if we begin there, and we can test this by saying action echo, oops. Come on. If we begin here, I've just proved that this only works if we're talking about the event trigger. Trivial demonstration, but again, just to show you how some things work. We begin here. What we're going to do is look at every product in the store. So for product in shop.products. There we go. And what we're going to do is build up a meta field value for each of these. And what we're going to be using are JSON string meta fields, which allow us to store a complex structured object inside of a normal meta field. So Mechanics Liquid implementation, it goes a bit beyond Shopify's. We get to play with rich objects here. So what we're going to do is here loop through every variant for variant in product. Oops. And here is where we build up the meta field value. So what we're going to say is assign meta field value, and for the key here, we're going to be using the variant ID, variant.id. I already know this is going to be a slight problem because the variant ID comes back as an integer, and a JSON key always needs to be a string. So we'll recast this in a second. But here, we'll say variant.SKU, and we'll close our for loop. And just for the purposes of testing, we're going to echo this out just to make sure that we've got everything we need. So action echo. There we go. Cool. All right, this is problematic. We're not actually here. Well, we're not seeing an error for it because We haven't run the task yet, although actually we'll just do that. We'll run the task and demonstrate the error, or I'll find out that I was wrong and we can move ahead more quickly than we would before. We're granting additional access here because Mechanic has scanned our script and determined that we need the ability to view products. So I'm going to grant that access here. I'm going to run the task. Cool, yep. Tried to use an integer as a key for hash assignment, but it's not a string. So go back to manage this task, and let's change the variant ID to a string, assign variant ID string equals. Quick way to do that. We'll use this instead of that. We'll save, and I could run again, but just because this feature is relatively new, I'm gonna hit retry instead. Retry. Okay, fantastic. We've already got our 2 products. The store only has 2 products. Here are their SKUs. Here are their variant IDs. Perfect. What I'm now going to do is, instead of an echo action, I'm going to generate a meta field. So for that, I'm going to hit this button to insert a quick Shopify action at the end. This is pre-filling just some dummy data. What we're going to do here is insert this at the end of our product for loop, or right before the end of our product for loop. We're going to update the product having this ID. Oops, product.id. Always use the JSON filter when you're outputting a JSON structure, structure. Even if you know that this integer, when output via Liquid, would arrive or would translate into a value that would look like valid JSON. If this ever is something unexpected, you'll want it to be formatted as JSON so that the error that you get is something useful and not your JSON was broken. So what we're going to do here is set up our meta field. Meta fields, this takes an array. And here is what we're going to define our meta field. So our key is going to be, actually, let's start at the beginning. Our namespace is going to be mechanic. Our key is going to be the ID of this task itself. So it's going to be this string right here. This way I can guarantee that the meta field that we're creating here isn't messed with by any other task. And it'll be pretty easy for anybody else working on this store account to say that, oh, okay, this meta field definitely belongs to mechanic and something's going on there that I shouldn't need to worry about. Okay, what else? We need the key, we need the value, which comes from up here. We use the meta field value variable. And then lastly, we need the value type. And I think JSON string is what I want to use here, but let's check the API really quickly. We are using the latest API version because that's what Mechanic uses by default. Okay, here we go. Meta field. Are you going to tell me? Well, okay, so value type is definitely the thing. However, okay, maybe I'm in the wrong place. Let's look at this documentation instead. Value type, yep, JSON string. Perfect. Okay, cool. So here's this, and this should just work so far. We'll run into an issue if we run this twice because we need an ID for running a meta field update. But when creating a meta field for the first time, you don't need an ID because Shopify assigns the IDs. So let's save this and run it and see what happens. Oh, I actually already know that we're going to run into an issue because we haven't generated any preview actions for the run, which means that Mechanic has no idea that we're going to want to write product data, which means that these are going to give us back a 403 permission error because Mechanic hasn't asked for permission for this. Mechanic is hopefully telling us that we need preview actions. Cool. So what we're going to do is, what should we do? So the method for this that I like best is to create some preview data that will create a new value for variables that we're already using so that all of this code continues to get exercised. I could instead do something like I mean, I could literally copy this and put that here, and we would have our preview action right here. But this is like, while it works, it would be slightly dangerous in big dramatic quotes, because in preview mode we've skipped all the logic that's actually important for the task, which means that a bug might be in here that I wouldn't catch until some later time during actual production use of this thing. So rather than taking this approach, I'm going to make use of the event preview to prove that our task is actually doing the thing that it is supposed to do. And to do that, I'm going to overwrite our shop variable. Assign shop equals hash, and then we're going to overwrite the products attribute of that. Assign shop products equals array, and then we're going to add in a product that actually has a variant and maybe a SKU. I already noticed that this updated in the background. Oh yeah, it updated, but we still don't have any pre-actions because there are no products, which means this for loop hasn't run yet. So assign shop products 0 equals, that's also going to be a hash. Variance is going to be an array, and variant 0 is going to be a hash. I might rewrite this because this is tedious. SKU is going to be oh hello. Cool. And we see here that our key is null, which I'm surprised by. Our ID is nothing because we don't have an ID. Let's lowercase that. Okay, so our ID is right, our value is right, our key is still null. Task ID. This might be a quirk of mechanic itself. Maybe the task variable isn't available during previews. I will have to take a look at that. Anyway, so here's this. For the sake of demonstration, I'll also show you that we can skip all of like this relatively complicated structure and instead do something like this. Oops, that needs to be an object. Cool. And that would also work. So these are two different approaches of getting to the exact same result demonstrated here. You can use whichever one is appropriate for whatever you're doing at the moment. I'll leave this one in because it's easier to do things like add a second SKU. Cool. So now we have a meta field with a value that looks like this. Now that I'm looking at this, I note that the value can't actually be a JSON object itself. It needs to be a JSON string. So rather than just taking our meta field value, which is an object, and turn it into JSON, I'm going to do that twice. Because what I actually want to use is a string that contains JSON. There we go, cool. So now we hit save. And mechanic needs more access because we are writing to a product now. So not only are we viewing or reading products, I forget how that phrased that before, but now we are managing products, which implies that we are editing them. Or not even implies, it just straight up means that. So we've saved, we've granted access, we're going to run the task again. And the key is too long, maximum is 30 characters. Okay. Let's shorten this up then. What should be used instead of the task ID? I suppose I could just use, if I'm not going to use a value that is unique to this particular task run, and I could still pull that off with reasonable certainty by like hashing this and then trimming it or something like that, but all that feels messy and I'd rather use something that is immediately understandable when you look at it. So the data that's in here could be used by other apps, probably shouldn't be, but could be. The data in here is easy to describe. So what I could say is variant IDs and SKUs. That at least is sane. somebody looking at this meta field would be able to see this and see the value and understand what is going on. So that's what we'll do. Run task. Yes, I'm sure I want to run this task. Perfect. We've updated the product of copy of short sleeve t-shirt with this meta field information. Wonderful. Okay, cool. All right. Step 2. Step 1B. I mentioned that I know that we'll run into an issue if I run this again, because if you submit a meta field update, you have to include the ID with it. Or, and this is what this error is pertaining to, if we're creating a new one, like a brand new one, we need to make sure that the key is unique. And the key should not be unique. We're actually doing an update, not creating a brand new thing. So what we need to do is get our meta field ID for each of these products. So for that, what we're going to do is, where does this go? Down here. Okay. So our ID is going to be the existing meta field itself. So this variable doesn't exist yet. I'll create it in a second. Cool. Assign. Here's where we need to get a little bit fancy with the syntax. If I were to do this, and I apologize, locksmith is my other product, mechanic, there we go. If we were to do this, what we would get back is the same thing that we would get back if we use this code over in a Shopify theme. We would get back the actual meta field value. That's not what I want to do. I want to get back the actual meta field object with its ID and all of these other properties on it. Although specifically what I care about is the ID. So in order to do that, I am going to pull down all of the meta fields that are in the mechanic namespace. I'm going to filter by the key, which is this thing, and I'm going to grab the first one. And that should just work. This usage right here, like if we stop at the namespace portion, we're just going to get back a list of meta fields. And if I filter by the right key, that should be just fine. Yeah, okay, cool. So save. The ID is null right here, which should be fine. Let's test that. Actually, let's not test that. Let's say always write code that creates a result that is sane to look at immediately. And ID : null is confusing. So here's this looks like for a brand new meta field. If I hit run task, cool. So we did get the meta field ID. This didn't actually change. So what I'm going to do here is add an additional check to say that, let's see, unless existing meta field dot value come on. Cool. All right, so this way we've guarded against doing unnecessary duplicate updates. I think that'll work. Let's find out. Run task. Nope, didn't work. Okay, so it is possible. Oh, you know what? It's because the meta field. Actually, do I know what? Let's find out. So the meta field value is a hash. The existing meta field value. The existing meta field value is a string. It's a JSON string. So what we're going to do instead of this is say that's that same parse JSON filter from before. Can only be used on strings. Cool. Actually, so what I was going to do is wrap this in an if statement, but what I'm going to do instead is say the default is just going to be null. And this is a string that can be parsed into JSON, returning null, an empty value, or nil if we're talking about Ruby and Liquid. So here's this. And unless the value equals the meta field value, we'll run the update. So we'll save, we'll run the task, and we'll see what we see. And we still have an update. Cool. I'm going to spend one more minute on this piece of the problem and then move on, because I don't care that much if this part doesn't work, because this trigger is something that only happens like once ideally. So let's see, action, echo, and let's look at the existing meta field value, and let's look at the new meta field value. Cool. And we'll see an echo here. There is no existing meta field as far as the preview is concerned, and this is the meta field value. Oh, I screwed that up. Yep. Oh, actually, no. Okay, cool. So here's where I was going with this. The existing meta field value is parsed out. It'll be an actual JSON object. And our meta field value is also a JSON object already. It is just that way from the beginning. Let's find out what we have here. So it may just be that mechanic doesn't consider, where my echoes? Mechanic doesn't consider one object to be equal to another. That's something that I didn't realize. That might be technically justifiable, but is confusing behavior, and I will revisit it. So what we're going to do instead of that approach is keep our strings and just compare those. So our existing meta field, our existing meta field value is just going to stay as a string. But instead of any of that, what we're going to do is take this to a JSON string and then compare them. And then here, I can remove this, and this looks like, I'm happy about replacing this because this makes more sense. If someone's reading the code and they weren't sure what was happening, I think the odds of them figuring it out are higher now as of this change. That's always something that I think about. So run task. Perfect. Nothing is exactly what I wanted to see. Although we can improve on nothing slightly, for example. It's always nicer to see something that's addressed to you, anticipating where you're at and what questions you might have, rather than seeing nothing at all. Perfect. Cool. Even happier with that. Okay, cool. So now we have our meta fields set up. Let's move on to the part of our story where we actually pay attention to product updates. There's one more part of this. Well, actually, no, we can start here. So when a product update occurs, and again, this data looks like this. It contains the snapshot of what the of what the product looks like as of the time of the update. When this comes in, we need to, what do we need to do? We need to decide whether or not we have enough information from which to make a decision. And then we need to make the decision about updating the product's tags. So the very first thing we can do is say, well, let's look at our existing SKU map. So assign products, variant IDs, and SKUs. And then we'll use the same meta field value that we had before. And I'm actually going to, this will now be the third time that I've had to type that string, and time number 2 is really when you should be moving this out to a variable. Meta field key. That was fun. Okay, so now we have this. Okay, so product, because we have a product object, because we're responding to a product event. We've product.metafields, .mechanic, and then we're looking up that specific key. Okay. To prove that this works, I'm actually just going to echo this out. By the way, you may have seen me use this sometimes with this, or with a comma and without. Both are supported. I tend to think that this looks more natural if you just have these three pieces. If you got a long list, that might feel better to you. Do whatever you want. So let's save this. Right now we're seeing null because the Shopify API is not allowed during task preview, which means that the meta field lookup is just returning null. Let's go over here and let's update our product. Cool, save. I'll come back over here. These are all of our attempts so far. So in a couple of seconds, we will see our event come in from Shopify. So far it's been from user. This is from Shopify. The product is updated, and we are echoing out the meta field value. Wonderful. So this is a rich object that contains a map of string, remember, string variant IDs on the left, and SKUs on the right. And this is what's in the meta field, not the SKU that was actually updated. So we're gonna have to do exactly the same test to find out what happens next. But regardless, we do see that in our event data, our super small SKU is now in place. Wonderful. We have information to work with. So what we can do here is say, so here's how I like to do things. I like to say up front, this product does not qualify. And then I like to prove myself otherwise. So what we're gonna do is say for variant in product.variance, and I'm remembering the structure that we had before, assign variant ID string, if, and let's name this for more conciseness, if that doesn't equal that, then the product qualifies. And that's really all I need to know, which means that here I can also break out of the for loop and we're good to go. Wonderful. Okay, cool. So that's our initial test. Down here we can say assign, if product qualifies. And here we're gonna do the tagging. And honestly, Mechanic is lacking a place where I can quickly look up liquid snippets. And I'm apologizing for that up front because I'm going to go to our help center to get the code that I want. How do I add or remove tags for Shopify resources? Well, we're going to use GraphQL for this. This is the first time we've used GraphQL in this task. It's a newer API that is more capable than Shopify's older API. And we're using this because using the tags add mutation, so-called, allows us to specifically add a single tag at a time rather than having to submit a complete list of what the tags should look like from start to finish. This means that many tasks running simultaneously can safely run this kind of thing all at once because we're specifying only tag to add and not all the tags as they should be, because in that latter case, if a bunch of those happened at once, tasks would trip over each other's toes and changes would get lost. So always use GraphQL for tagging is the moral of that story. So here we need to add a tag of some kind. What tag will it be? Well, for this, we're going to allow the merchant to configure it. For that, we're going to use options.product tag to add, cast that to JSON, and we see that appear magically up here. If I fill in this, over in our preview, we will see tags ASDF. Wonderful. This could be called anything, and Mechanic would automatically generate the right form field for it. So product tag to add. I actually don't want that to be optional. I want that to be required. So I'm going to add the required flag onto the end of this name. Now we have an error. Changed. Cool. All right, now let's address the question of previews. So right now, this is only working in the absence of any event preview related data like we have up here. This is working because Mechanic is using data from a previous event in the same way that it did before for this other one. But it's using data from a previous event that happens to contain everything we need in order to make a decision. And what I mean by that is that we have our list of product variants that comes in with the product update event. There's a list of variants. And because the API access is disallowed, this just equals null, which means that there's no way that this inequality check would ever not pass, which means that this will always be true no matter what. Which is fine, probably, but for the sake of completeness, I'm going to do something similar to what we did up here. And we're going to put that here. So instead of products, we just have a single product, so I can back this up a little bit, or back this out a little bit. And I want to be able to test that our meta field comparison is working properly. And then we're using our meta field key. And then we have what should be our list of variants. Okay, and then we're going to assign that to a variable. Oops, product equals product JSON parse JSON. And this variable is different than what I've got up top, so let's move that here, or copy that here. Okay, cool. So now I have a product with a value that I definitely know about. I'm sorry, with a set of variants that I definitely know about, and a value here that's definitely just an empty object, which means that this will still happen. However, if I grab these, I wonder if I will save myself time this way or not. I'm holding down Command, by the way, as I copy this stuff. I like to use multiple cursors to save myself time. Whether or not we will in this case, I'm not sure. Kind of looks like we will. Yay. Cool. I established that second cursor by just holding down Command and clicking somewhere else. Cool. So right now, these things are identical. And what I intend to do here, I think that's what I meant that to be. I'm going to fix this one up here because consistency removes confusion down the road. Okay, cool. So these meta fields are exactly, like this exactly maps to what's going on up here, except not for that. Come on, copy, paste. There we are. Okay, so now these things exactly map up, and we see that our update event has gone away. If I change this to this, then our thing will come back. If I change this to this, that will come back. Perfect. If I change anything else about this, like if I changed it to null, well, we'll get an error because that's not valid JSON. If I change it to a normal null, then we'll get a thing again because this meta field doesn't exist. And this brings up an important question. What should happen if the previous meta field isn't there? This scenario means that we don't actually have enough information to say if anything changed because we're just missing the meta field, which means that we shouldn't be doing anything in this case and probably means that we should actually be returning an error. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to say and Liquid refers to null as nil. That's how those things translate between JSON and Liquid. If that's the case, then we're going to run an error. Action, or not an action. What am I doing? Error. What do I want to say here? I don't know if that'll work. Use the run task button. My highlighting is telling me this probably won't work, so I have to phrase this error differently. Well, so this should be nil right now. I still have this on the clipboard and I want to keep it. Oh no, I don't have it on the clipboard anymore. Okay, cool. Action echo. So we do have null, which means that this error should actually be happening. Did I do something wrong or weird here? Oh, our error is not erroring. I wonder why that is. Maybe it's because of this weird thing that I did? Yes, it is. Cool. So now I know that that won't work. So we'll use the other syntax. Yep, cool. So valid JSON string inside of error tags, and we have this thing here. So if the thing is nil, then that's an error that should prevent anything else from happening, which is exactly what it will do. And now that we know that, we can restore our test data. Or, well, we can restore the data that would result in the product update actually taking place. No, that's not how I want to do that. I want to do this. I'll copy that. Perfect. Okay. Cool. So here's what we've got. We have a task that down here pretty explicitly lays out, let's make that even more explicit, lays out a change in the SKU. Perfect. We've got some logic down here that says if we, well, let's first pull out what we remember. If we remember nothing, return an error, because we do need a chance to actually store something previous so that we have enough information by which to make a decision, or with which. Here we have our loop through the variance, and here's a place where we add a tag. Awesome. We are missing one more piece, maybe two, but the piece that I'm currently thinking of is we need to update this meta field, because otherwise, every time the product is updated after this, it will continue to get retagged and retagged and retagged. The retagging should only ever happen once. So what we're going to do to address that is, that's basically what we did up here before. So let's take a look. It's almost exactly the same thing. I wonder if I can, I don't like duplicating code ever. So I wonder if there's a way for me to do this. I bet there is. Let's do this. Let's take all of this. Yep, let's do this. Assign products to products that need a meta field update. If I can think of a shorter way to say that, I will. Good enough for now. I actually don't need to initialize that to array. I need to say that that's going to be shop.products. Down here, though, well, okay, I've got important code on the clipboard, so let's not lose that. Let's put that here at the end. And unindent that and say for product in, and then my variable name was what? Was that? Not too far. No, I did not go too far. Here we go. Okay. For every product in a list, we run the actual update, which means that all we need to do to add that to this part of our task is say, except I know this won't work because we need to actually initialize that variable, and I didn't do that here. That's intentional on my part, because I think that values that you always need to be of a certain type should be initialized at the very beginning. So we initialize this thing as an array, and then in our trigger, all we're doing uniquely between these two different events is saying the products that need a meta field update are all of them. And then down here, what we're saying is that if the, actually, that can go inside of this if case as well. If the product qualifies, as in if a SKU has changed, then that product needs a meta field update. Then we get outside of that event topic based thing up here, and all we have left is the part where we actually update meta fields. This might just work down here. Yeah, it did. It did. Wonderful. Except for this part where our ID is null, so we need to update that. But awesome. Okay, cool. So we've got code that is not duplicated. Wonderful. The product needs an admin GraphQL API ID. And to get this null out of the way and give us an actual value, all we need to do is add that to our product that we've constructed here. Oops, what am I doing? There we go, cool. So now we have our product, we have our thing, good to go. Okay, awesome. We are done functionally. Let's be kind. Let's also handle, I like to order these in a certain way. Let's also handle product creation, because if we create a new product, we can use that opportunity to update its meta field right away and never require the merchant to have to go back and hit this run task button every time a new product is created. So to do that, let's think about the minimum that we need to do. I mean, the minimum that we need to do is probably just say, like, this is a trigger. We can change this from an else if to, oops, Shopify, nope, come on. Can really just add two of these, make this a create, and borrow this line for use here. And that should really be it. There's no logic here, there's no condition. Every time a product is created, we need to set its meta field. The only time that it gets conditional is down in the update. So this should just work, yeah. So when a user triggers a task, we update a product. We'll update many products, but this is just illustrative. When it's created, we update the product. And when it's updated, we maybe tag it, and we update the product. Perfect. So let's save, and let's test this through the whole life cycle. Let's go over to, how do I want to do this? I think I'll just create, the only thing that we won't be able to trivially test is hitting that error that I generated. Because the only time this error will come up is if a product is updated that we haven't seen before. And now that we have a product create in place, we're definitely going to see the error. I guess I've just answered my question. We can test that scenario by just removing the create event, hitting save, creating a new product. For kicks, I'm going to copy this just because I feel like that's fun. It might cost me there we go, in time. Copy of short sleeve t-shirt. There's no create event here, which means we won't see anything in the task history down below. But if I update this one, sure. If I update this one, we should see our error come through as soon as the update is actually transmitted from Shopify. Internally, they batch their updates that they send out so that if 1 million updates occur in 5 seconds, only one event is actually dispatched. Ooh. Oh, did it duplicate the meta field with it? Oh my gosh. Oh, it did. The create time is different than the update time. Dang it. Okay, cool. So that was fun. We're not going to duplicate. That cost me time, but not learning. So instead of duplicating, we're going to create a brand new product eventually. Bum, bum, bum. Save. And as before, there's no create subscription, so the task isn't going to do anything. But now let's do an update. let's say the SKU is going to be banging. If I head back to the task and scroll down to the recent activity area, we'll see an update and an error. Perfect. Exactly as expected. So go back to the task. We'll run the task. And we should see one metafield update just for a brand new one. We have an update of the metafield. We have another metafield update. Just the two. I'm not sure why we had two metafield updates just now. That might be a bug. Let's continue testing and see what happens. So we've got that. Where am I? If I am here and I change this from banging to no longer banging, oh, what am I saying? User triggered a task. We did that based on strings. I'm not sure why this other one happened. Open question. Okay, so banging is no longer banging, and we updated the meta field with that value, and we added a tag. Perfect. So that's good. I want to test that trigger one more time. This should do nothing if everything is lined up properly. Yep. Cool. All right. Last thing that I want to try is putting our create back in and actually testing the whole lifecycle. And I'm going to order them this way. Save. Cool. I'm going to create a new product because duplicating products apparently duplicates metafields as well. I guess that makes sense. Sure. And let's test our merchant's original scenario, which is I have a new product with no SKUs, and I want to find out when it gets a SKU. Product was created. Metafield is now in existence. We'll go over here and we'll add a SKU. Go back to the task itself. Take a look at its history. Boom, 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 boom. Cool. We have two check marks. The first one is for updating the meta field, and we have another one for adding a tag. Ideal. So now if I go over here and I run one more update, we should see nothing at all happen because the SKU didn't change. Let's wait for that. Really, we have evidence of our success right here. This update is related to the work that we did after this update. Whenever you perform a write, you'll get another update. And this one does nothing. That's perfect. Cool. Last thing to note, Mechanic has a store level setting that allows you to hide events that did nothing and task runs that did nothing. Let's just start there. If I use that and I come back to our task, this will get a whole lot cleaner. I will only see the task runs that and events that actually did something or had an error, as was the case here. If you ever are curious though about everything that's going on, you can use this filters here, or the filter thing here, to update this and get a quick idea of everything that's happening. Very useful when doing development. We'll remove those. Cool, success. We're going to deliver this to our merchant. We'll add it to our task library for anyone else to use, and we are going to continue having an awesome day. Hope you do the same. Cheers.